Hello, and welcome to this conversation about the riveting film Tar, which has received 6 Academy Award nominations. I'm Dave Karger from Turner Classic Movies, and what a pleasure it is for me to be here with Todd Field, the writer, director, and producer of the film, and lead actress Cate Blanchett. Hello to you both.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, hi.
I'm going to do my best, Adam Gopnik here for the two of you. Todd, as people who are watching this may or may not be aware, in addition to your extensive acting credits, you also have a background in the music world, studying music, playing music, more in the jazz field than classical, but still. I'd be curious to know, when you decided to set this story about power and the abuse of power in the music world, what were some things that you already knew about this world that you wanted to impart? And what are some things that you learned about the music world while you were researching and writing this film?
Well, I didn't know a great deal about concert music. I think that, that's one of the sort of benefits in terms of our jobs as storytellers, which is we get to kind of go back to school, and learn about things with the sort of open heart of an amateur. My background was in music, but it was in jazz, which is a very different milieu. And we're looking at power structures, and the classical music world is a sort of hermetic one, and a storied one, and has its own history and its sort of set of rules and secret signs and handshakes and arcana that from the outside would be very difficult to understand. So I kind of needed a very reliable tour guide into that world, and I was really blessed in John Mauceri lending me his time for about 4 weeks in dialogue with him. And John, as you may or may not know, is a fabulous conductor, but he's also had been Leonard Bernstein's assistant for 19 years. So he had a tremendous amount of knowledge that would be germane to this story specifically. And he also had been around film because he had been the conductor at the LA Phil for the Hollywood Bowl for music nights for many years. So he wasn't bothered when I asked him very practical questions having to do with story and things like that, like would this be plausible, et cetera, et cetera.
So he was a great sounding board, it sounds like, for larger issues, but also specific phrases and lines of dialogue, or not that in the weeds?
No, I mean, the thing is that if you listen to this character has, what was important is that she understand what she's talking about, not that we understand what she's talking about, that her knowledge was undeniable. And her knowledge has a very far reach in it. What I wanted for her was the ability to reference things that someone that would be John's age would reference generationally. I mean, John's in his 70s. So, there's a sort of tradition in classical music that if you've worked, you trace a family tree. So if you've worked with Bernstein, then Bernstein worked with, so-and-so and so-and-so and so, and it takes you all the way back to Beethoven. And those stories, just like we tell ourselves stories, are sort of passed from one generation to the other. And that's sort of how that knowledge traditionally has sort of accumulated. So I wanted her to have access to that. So there are very particular turns of phrases. There are very particular references that this character makes, specifically in the Juilliard scene. There's a very obscure reference that she would have had to have been told. She certainly would have experienced in real time. And yeah, John was indispensable for that, for sure.
Cate, in a general sense, are you a music head? How does music factor into your life just on a daily basis?
Yes, I mean, I have incredibly eclectic taste. So, having 4 children, I listen to all sorts of music, and my kids are always introducing me to high and lowbrow, quote unquote music. I was taken to classical music concerts as a child. But what has happened in quite a noisy household is that oftentimes, if I had time to myself, rather than put music on, I would sit in silence, in a way. And so this film actually brought music quite powerfully back into my my life, and you never know where the point of connection is going to come with a story and with a character, and oftentimes it bypasses the intellect. And in a script, when you first pick it up, Todd's script is incredibly dense, but as Todd just said, you just need to know that she's in command of her craft, that she knows her onions. The audience doesn't need to know all of those details, but I did as an actor. So I went through the language, but in the end, I think the emotional connection came through the music that she referenced, her favorite points of music that she referred to, and also to the Mahler's Fifth. So to go back and I think I'm probably not alone in this, is that often with very powerful pieces of music, we'll put them on when we want to change our mood, but we won't always sit and attend to them. We'll have them in the background. And when you actually sit and attend to Mahler, for instance, just because we're talking about this, it's the level of nuance and layers and details that you begin to pick up from a recording, let alone when you hear it live, is profound. So it's shifted my quality of listening, I think. I'm really appreciative from, just on a personal level.
Cate, I was trying to imagine what the experience must have been of a first read of the script of Tar, and to see phrases like ultrasonic epistemic dissident.
One of my favorites.
Okay, I would have been a dictionary, please. I mean, were you looking things up, or were you letting it kind of wash over you on the first read?
I started to. Yes, I have 26 volumes of the Oxford Dictionary, thank goodness, and I do love a thesaurus, because often in life, characters often don't. As people, we don't use I'm the queen of malapropisms. Like I'm always using almost the right word, but not quite, or a word that doesn't completely express my emotions. But Lydia Tarr has a laser sharp use of word and phrase. She says exactly what she means, except that she's not always telling the truth. And so that's what I in the end I put the dictionary aside, because the first read of the script had and obviously you never read a film script without being in dialogue with the director, particularly when the director has written it. So you let me read it first, and then we started talking, and I had 1,000 questions. But in the end, the first read, I thought, I'm going to let it wash over me, because it makes rhythmic sense. In the same way that sometimes we can't describe our favorite pieces of music, they affect us in a way that brings memory into the present, and makes us sort of think about the future. Music's a conduit to sort of a connective tissue, between lots of different things that we can't put words to. And so in the end, I connected with it in a way that I didn't try to sort of articulate. But now I'm doing press, so I have to try and do it, which is quite hard, actually.
You're almost done. You're almost done. Yeah, so Cate talks about the rhythmic quality of the film. I mean, this is a question that I imagine you could answer with a very long response, but how is this film in your mind like a concerto? How is it like a series of movements, a series of tempos, more or less than any other film, given the subject matter?
Well, that's a very good question, and I think that part of it, you're saying more or less than any film. I think all films are built in that manner. I mean, there's a lot of story in Mahler's Fifth Symphony. It starts with a funeral march, then followed by a storm. There's a love theme in it. There are many things going on. And that was the thing about Mahler. Mahler really, he based. In many ways, he was one of the great parents of what we would ultimately think of as underscoring or movie music, and he was at the center of this piece of music, and he put everything in it, and he wanted to put you into it, and Cate and I had a conversation just the other day, with Gustavo Dudamel, about the Mahler Five, and about why it was important. And and what Gustavo said was that, of course, you went with Mahler's Fifth. It was it is there was no other choice. So I think that you're right. I could give you a much longer answer. I could probably leave it at that.
But I think it's interesting though, Dave, that I found it an interesting counterpoint that the composition that Lydia and working with Hilda on the score that Lydia Tarr is composing, as well as trying to conduct Mahler 5, was a really interesting process, because Mahler is so layered and varied, and then this piece that Lydia is composing is so spare, and so I found that quite an interesting sort of counterpoint, that she's got so many plates spinning and her life is so complicated, and the music that she's trying to play has so many nuances, and you see in rehearsal that she's focusing on micro currents within the music, but then the quite very simple, quiet, lyrical melody that she's actually composing, it is actually what's haunting her. As our lives become more complicated, perhaps the bravest, most noble thing is to smash that complication away and get back to simplicity, get back to the core of the music, which of course she's estranged from. And you don't have to be a musician or middle-aged to understand, how we can quickly become estranged from ourselves, and the reason why we got into whatever we're passionate about in the first place.
At what point, Todd, did you introduce the idea to Cate of these high wire single shot scenes, particularly the Juilliard scene? And obviously, Cate, when you're reading the Adam Gopnik scene, you're obviously noticing, wow, this is a very long, scene. But at what point did you realize that some of these were going to be these single take scenes?
Well, I mean, in terms of the Juilliard scene, that was something that happened before we were on the ground, before Cate and I were on the ground together in Berlin, just before. And that was really just a matter of trying to think of the score of physical actions for this character through the film, and suddenly it becoming abundantly clear that, other than the fact that we see her stage left waiting to go on with Adam Gopnik, and she's standing, that we've yet to see her move. And that was really important, which is, this movie is about someone that believes they control time. And the first time we see her move, it was important that she be in control of the tempo, because she's going to lose control of time by the end. So once I called Cate on the side of the road and said, look, I know we had this scene laid out in a very particular way, essentially 36 very specific camera setups. We need to still do them, but we need to do them in one continuous take, and you have to control the tempo. You have to control time, and you have to drive the scene. And Cate didn't hesitate. She said, you can't do that. And I said, why? And she said,
it's not in my contract. It's just like, I'm calling my agent.
She said because I need to see the student's leg, because I'm bothered by kinophonia, that those motions, they really bother this character, just like sound bothers her. And I said, we'll figure that out. And if we figure that out, she said, fine, then you could do it in one. She didn't, she never, Cate's not one to complain. So it was a lot for her to take on, and she did it with that was her only, at least to me, was the only protest that you had, Cate. So there was that. But in terms of the rest of them, in terms of sort of the philosophy behind how we photographed the film, it wasn't until about 3 weeks in, we began the film for very practical reasons that we had no control over, with all the orchestra material. And that orchestra material had to be planned out with a great deal of coverage. The very first day, we had 95 camera setups, and those had to be determined, like, where is Cate conducting? Who is she? Where is her attention directed? And at what phrase, what bar, all of that stuff. So those things had to be massively rehearsed, over-rehearsed before we even got in with the orchestra, to understand if we could be nimble enough to make our day, because we only had a certain amount of time with them. But once that ended and we left the concert hall area, I think it was probably about 2 weeks in, maybe, because we had a lot of company moves where we kind of settled in, and Cate said, you don't like to do a lot of coverage, do you? And I said, no. And she said, okay. The way that she and I figured out our mornings together were essentially alone, unless we were fortunate enough to get in on a location on the weekend with maybe Nina Haas or someone else at their residence. But for the most part, we figured that out in the first hour of the day, and it was for that reason, mainly because the thrill, one of the thrills of being able to work with Cate Blanchett is to see what she can do, that not many human beings can do. So the safety net of coverage and the idea of making choices after the fact seemed to hold less thrill, aside from the fact that we wanted a sort of objective reality in terms of how we spend time spatially with this character.
So Cate, for a Juilliard scene, is your mindset, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Or is it, I can't wait to do this?
A bit of both. I mean, I think having spent years and years in the theatre, you kind of learn or train yourself to think that profound anxiety is just excitement. But there was so much to do. I remember when we were doing Lord of the Rings, there was this huge battle sequence, and I'd see every Saturday morning, I'd see Vigo and Pete walking off together, really, really happy. And it looked like they were going to like a football match or something. And I said to them the first Saturday I waved to them. Second Saturday, I said, where are you guys going every Saturday? He said, we're going to battle the orcs. And they had this massive, massive battle scene that was going to take, go on for like half an hour. And every Saturday morning, they would just chip away at the battle scene and chip away at the battle scene. They didn't do it for 2 weeks solid. They just chipped away. So it gave some time to think about it. And they would do this, over the 9 months. And it was a little bit like that. I thought, well, except we didn't have 9 months, but about 9 hours. But Todd and I sort of went into battle with this thing every morning. So we sat in a space together and we mused about where one might go. And we said, well, okay, if I spend too long here, that means you don't see Max enough. You need to see the students. So it was a little bit like I love moving through space. I think it's how I make sense of a scene. So it felt in a way like a mega speed through theater rehearsal, except of course Todd's filmmaking and what he wanted from the relationships of the performance was very fly on the wall. So it was an absolute dance with the camera crew, and almost impossible for the sound department, because there was the students were playing music. I had to play the piano, and then we had voices coming from various points, and it was quite an echoey auditorium and very, very difficult to light. So then, of course, a lot of the decisions about where the blocking was, you get to know, okay, well, I need to be a bit more in the light here. So it was a dance between all of us, which ultimately, in answer to your question, was really thrilling. Because it's great when you can just feel, from out of the corner of your eye, that the camera's a little bit slower this time, so you have to move slower. It's a little bit like you're doing some strange technical tango.
It's thrilling for us to watch, so it makes sense.
Well.
Yeah. Todd, I saw an interview that you and Cate did together, I think on Variety, and you described her as having the mind of a filmmaker. Is this what you're talking about with these kind of conversations and the collaborative nature of this relationship?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that's the thing. I think that oftentimes, we all have responsibilities that are inherent with our disciplines, but at the end of the day, we're artists in dialogue, and I think that at your peril or at your at your regret, you would ignore the opportunity to be in dialogue with another filmmaker. And Cate is a filmmaker, and she she understands the enormity of a narrative. She understands all of the pieces of it, and so it's just it's an extraordinary opportunity to try to make something together that is much more exciting and makes you feel more alive and awake than you could possibly do by yourself. And that's why I was desperate for Cate to come and to be able to collaborate with her in the first place, and why I was also in earnest terrified that she might say no, because there was a lot for her to take on. If somebody were to send you a script and say, just before you can even talk about the script, before you can even talk about the character, really, you have to learn to speak German. You have to learn to not just beat time, but actually conduct with art. To actually be able to lead one of the leading orchestras, one of the oldest orchestras on the planet. You need to be able to play Bach on the piano while you're doing a scene, as if you're not just a concert pianist, but Billy Joel, at a piano bar. That's a very particular skill. There are many things that would have been daunting to almost any actor, and squared. And that was before she even was able to talk about the character. That's I still honestly, I still pinch myself that it happened, because had she said no, that's it, this film doesn't exist.
But I mean, look, that's very kind, Todd, but I think, I love collaborating with people. I mean, the reason why I wanted to be an actor was to be in dialogue with people who were smarter than me and more interesting than me. And Todd always knows where to put the camera. I mean, you have this acute quality of listening and this laser sharp focus that it's almost like you've got a 360-degree vision of the thing. And so we'd discuss things and we say, what about this? And then you'd think about it, and then you just move the camera 50 centimeters or half a foot, whatever. I can't do imperial to metric to one side, because it makes all the difference. It's like, I keep thinking sometimes you'll see a filmmaker and they'll have someone in close up, and then a different filmmaker will have someone in close up, but it's just a close up of a face. Whereas other filmmakers like Todd will have a close up of something, but it's about so much more than what it seems to be about. And it's like great photographers. It's like, why can someone take a photograph of a cup and then someone else take a photo of a cup and somehow it's speaking about the universe? It's just a gift of attending to the offers that are made. And the great thing that Todd does as a director is we really value all of the offers that everyone makes from all departments, and then you'll fold them all together, and then you'll say, we can do this, but we can't do this, and here's why. And once you get the here's why, you go, oh, okay, so I'll make the offer from this angle then. So you always know where you stand with Todd, and that means that the atmosphere on set was so electric and alive, and everyone was on the front-footed, waiting for the next thing to happen and what they could. It was really energized and buoyant.
I really believe that we go to the movies, we go to the cinema to watch each other, to watch people. That's the technical stuff is interesting, if that's what you're interested in, but all of that can be learned or absorbed through enthusiasms and appetites, but the people part, that's the I think that's that's the art of it.
You have to really love the story you're telling to stay with it as a director. Obviously, through the inception and the originating stages of it. And then you have to be able to plan it, to cast it, to location scout it, to shoot it, and then you have to fall out of love with it, and cut all the bits, all your favorite bits out. Whereas as an actor, it's a slightly different process in that you really have to do it without a healthy lack of consequence. I always tell myself, well, no one will go and see this, and often that's the case. So, yeah, be careful what you say to yourself.
Actually, that's not true. You have a very good track record, Kate.
But
Yeah.
but then you have to sort of forget it in a way, and you move on to something else, often as an antidote to what you've done before. So it's quite a different process, really.
Let me finish with one question for each of you. Todd, this film, as I'm sure you imagined it would spark lots of different and interesting conversations, and it has, amongst people in the classical film world. It sparked conversations about dreams and ghosts and so many different things. I'm curious to know if, by and large, the conversations this movie has sparked were ones you expected or ones that have surprised you.
Well, both, and that's the dream. The dream is you're going to learn about your film from other people, that's the goal, and that's why we built this thing. And that's something that Kate and I talked about from the very beginning. If we had, achieved even anywhere near the close of what we were aiming for, that target, that it would spark all kinds of conversation, that we would be able to look at the film ourselves in hindsight through very different lenses. Although there was intent behind our choices, and we both have very strong opinions about those things, that there would be room for other people's, not just their readings of the film, but their feelings about the film. And those reactions hopefully would be very, very strong ones, that would inspire a conversation about certain things that both of us had been sort of talking about and thinking about for a very long time. So, yeah, I don't think that, look, this thing has become part of the public discourse, and there's an editorial written about it every day. That's not something I don't think Kate and I would have ever imagined would happen. And in that way, it's been incredibly satisfying, obviously. So
that's great. And Kate, I was struck by one thing that you said in your BAFTA acceptance speech. Congratulations on that. You said this experience changed your life. I'd like to know how.
I'm still processing it, to be honest. I think the depth of collaboration and how much I learned from Todd, how meticulous he is and how generous he is and how focused he is and how wildly experimental he is, and just the depth of his intelligence and knowledge about how to build a scene and to build a film frame by frame in a way, not moving on to the next frame until you've solved that first frame, completely shifted the way I looked at cinema, really, to be honest. And it's also because it was, I don't know where it's coming, this character and this story just hit me at a time. I guess it's coming out of the pandemic when, we made this during the pandemic, with all the challenges that everybody had when they were making films over that time, that it made me think about in the way that Lydia Todd did. It's like it's a come to Jesus moment. It's like saying, well, what am I going to do now? And when Todd has set the bar so high, the opportunity is so great. It's like, well, what do you do next? Like
something together, please. The two of you.
I've said this to Todd before. Like it is very bittersweet for me. The response to it has been extraordinary, and having played a character who spends her entire life thinking that she can control or eradicate her shadow and control how she's perceived, it's been wonderful to let go of control of the film and to see what happens. And there was a kind of a wild abandon to the way we were working in a way that I'd felt on stage before. And I've worked with some incredible directors. I'm so privileged, but there was such a it felt so free, and I don't know. It's bittersweet because I've had that experience, but I know it's never going to come again. So yeah, but it's very precious. When deep change happens, in a way, I can't give words to it yet. I just feel my molecules have shifted somewhere, and that's not a euphemism.
Well, the work exists. The work exists, and we're so happy about it. It's such a pleasure to hear from both of you, Todd Field, Cate Blanchett. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks to all of you for watching.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.